Well, it is good to be back. We were gone last Sunday. We were in North Carolina for Thanksgiving at my brother Glenn's home. 35 gullies in one house, studiously avoiding any mention of politics. And then on Saturday, we attended my nephew Christopher's wedding just north of Charlotte in Lincolnton, North Carolina. Long drive with lots of holiday traffic, 11 hours each way, dodging semi-trucks and storms, passing one billboard after another, warning us to let Jesus into our lives or else. What you see in the South. On Thanksgiving weekend, one is especially sensitive to signs of God's blessings, and I experienced just such a blessing on our way home. When we stopped at a rest park in Tennessee, walking past the vending machines, I stopped to see if they had my favorite candy bar, Payday, the best candy bar in the universe. And there in one of the machines was a lone Payday, the last one in the line, just waiting to drop after the insertion of 5 quarters, which I didn't have. But it was then, at that moment, that I noticed someone else, most likely an angel from heaven, had deposited 5 quarters in the vending machine, but hadn't made a selection. So I poked the correct numbers, and the Payday candy bar tumbled down into my waiting hand, a sign of God's blessing if ever there were one. And you can take my word on this. I've studied theology. I know what to look for. When I was little, I was told by my brother Glenn that this was how children were born. That God had a vending machine up in the sky and would put in a quarter, poke the correct numbers, and out would fall a baby, the next one in line, a blessing from God. Biology has never been my strong suit, so I believed this for many years, up until Joanne and I had our own children. 2 little boys who I wanted to name Snickers and Payday, but Joanne wouldn't let me. She wouldn't let me. She said, absolutely not. This has been a common theme in our marriage. Joanne not letting me do what I want. And I'll be honest, I didn't want to go to North Carolina. I did not want to go. When my brother called and said, we want to have North Carolina at our house, we want to have Thanksgiving at our house this year, I had kept thinking up excuses that I couldn't. I'm sorry. And then they threw in the wedding, and well, that pretty well sealed the fate. But I wanted to spend Thanksgiving weekend sitting by the wood stove at home with Joanne, going for walks and reading and sitting in the kitchen. But then Joanne read an article. She's been doing a lot of that lately, reading articles about being present for other people. And in one particular article, the author referred to it as showing up. Showing up, the importance of showing up. And Joanne had read this right before my brother's phone call to come to North Carolina. And just as I was saying to him, oh, I don't think we'll be able to make it, she yelled so he could hear, we'll be happy to be there. And so we went. She said, we need to show up. We need to show up. So off we went to North Carolina, and I'm glad we did. I've been talking about my geezer manifesto, things I want to do before I croak. And today I want to add to that list, showing up, being present. As we age, we have a tendency, don't we, of retreating a bit from life, a tendency to isolate ourselves away from our families, away from our friends, away from our world. But what would happen if we decided to show up? If we decided to be present and engage life, not shrink from it, especially when perhaps especially when it is difficult to do so. The first miracle of Jesus at the wedding feast of Cana was about Jesus blessing the water, turning it into wine. But I think the blessing happened before that. The blessing began when Jesus decided to show up for a wedding, something most men are loath to do. I can find all sorts of excuses not to attend a wedding, and often have, but Jesus, I am reminded, showed up. And what do you want to bet? That if Jesus had lived long enough, he would have been a wonderful geezer. He would have been the 80-year-old grandpa dancing with his wife at their granddaughter's wedding. You should have seen Joanne dancing at the wedding. I was in the singles line talking with the guys about motorcycles, but there was Joanne right out on the dance floor dancing with everyone. She is so often present in a way I am not. Last month I was talking with a family member who's in the geezer range of life, geezer stage of life, and I asked him if he was going to the big family wedding. I said, "Are you going to go?" And he said, "Nope." And since I never mind my own business, I asked him why not. And he said, because he, the groom, never calls me to see how I'm doing. He said this. I pointed out that the groom had 5 children, worked full time, and might have other things on his mind than calling his aged uncle. I didn't push the issue, but it honked me off. And it made me think of all the wonderful people in my life who've gone out of their way to be present for me and for the people they love. It made me think of my grandmother, Norma. That woman was everywhere. Kindergarten, graduations, 8th grade graduations, high school commitments, birthdays, weddings, funerals, school plays, little league games, Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving. Rode the Greyhound bus from Vincennes to Points North countless times, always with a cake on her lap. When I was recorded as a friend's minister, she was there. It was her first time in a Protestant church, and she was terrified, as if God would see her there and strike her dead. But she was there, present and accounted for. Now, many of us are the matriarchs and patriarchs in our family now. That occurred to me this week. At Thanksgiving, I looked across at my sister and I thought to myself, she's now the matriarch of our family. My second thought was, God help us all. But there she was. And my brother Glenn, the patriarch. And if you're not a patriarch or matriarch now, you will be one day. And let me tell you the first rule of matriarch and patriarchs. You have to be present. You have to be present. You have to be engaged, not indifferent. You have to be present. Now, isn't it interesting to us what happens as we age? What question do we hear the most? When are you going to retire? Retire. Isn't that an interesting word? Retire. To cease work and involvement. Retire. To withdraw. Just when we need to show up and be present. I spent some time this week researching things people did in their geezer years. Colonel Sanders started Kentucky Fried Chicken with his first Social Security check. Now, I know fried chicken might not be important to you, but to me, Colonel Sanders belongs in the pantheon of the gods. Taishi Igarashi climbed Mount Fuji at the age of 100. Grandma Moses painted her first picture when she was 76. Peter Roget published his first thesaurus when he was 73, which as a writer I find incredible, amazing, extraordinary, and perhaps even mind-boggling. Behind all these achievements is the conviction that age does not exempt us from accomplishment. There are people to love, work to be done, books to read and write, pictures to paint, and causes to embrace. Be present. Show up. When Joanne was pregnant with our youngest son, and I asked if we could name him Payday, she said no. I said, well, then what will we name him? She said, we'll name him Samuel. I love that name, Samuel. It means one who listens. It's a biblical name, rooted in the story of Samuel and an old prophet named Eli, with whom Samuel the child was living so he could care for Eli in his old age. This is what people did before nursing homes came along. And one night, Samuel was awakened. He heard a voice. He thought it was God. And he ran to Eli because he didn't know what to do. And Eli said, whenever you think God is speaking to you, there is only one proper response, and that is to say, I am listening. I am listening. This week, friends, may you listen. And when God is asking you to show up and to be present, may you hear that, and may you do that. This is our prayer this week. Amen.